People who have killed another person, accidentally or on purpose, what happened? I'll preface this by saying it was an accident. I was 11 years old and had gotten into that tinkering phase kids go through, and I was fiddling with my brakes, gears, etc. I went on to ride a super steep hill that was really popular to test my creation. As I was blasting down the hill, the nut that secures the handlebars jostles loose, and I lose all semblance of control. I can remember the car coming towards me from the opposite direction, but after that, I hit the ground. The car swerved to miss me and went straight into a tree, killing the whole family. Mom, dad, and 2 sons. I lived in an extremely small town, and the aftermath was horrible. Long after the candle night vigils, that I still see in my nightmares, and memorials, ended, and I and my family were bullied, harassed, and generally shunned. Kids can be horrible, but as a child, I understood that. But the adults of the town, they were cruel. They called me MK, Murder Kid. By the age of 13, I attempted to unalive myself. After a lengthy hospital stay, my family had to move across the state out of the town we went generations back in. I'm all grown now, and only recently felt safe going back there and to the hill that changed everything. Part of my continuing therapy. The worst part about it is that the spot where they died there is a perfectly maintained cross and flowers bearing their names. Someone still mourns them, brings them flowers, and clears the weeds away. I was not prepared for that. It ripped open any feelings of closure I had. In my head, it was over for everyone but me. It wasn't. So how do I live now? One day at a time. There are good ones and bad ones, but not a day goes by that I don't think about it. It's like living with a disfigurement, perhaps that biblical mark of Cain. I feel others can see it in my eyes the same way I can. Next story. I was 13 years old living in Norway. Growing up, I loved climbing trees, so me and my friends would climb the tallest ones we could find. Our town in Norway was quite small and quite high in elevation, so the best trees were down towards the river. We decided to get together one Friday and head down to the river to do some climbing. We always took a backpack with a lunch and snacks and water with us so we could hang out in our tree until dark. It was my friend's younger brother, 11, who was carrying the backpack full of snacks, and I was carrying the backpack full of drinks. My friend's younger brother was not as used to climbing trees as we were, but like any little brother, he wasn't about to let that stand in his way and prevent him from hanging out with his big brother and his best friend. As it was a rare occurrence, we'd let him hang out with us. We were almost to the part of the tree where there's a spot for us to all be able to sit. I got there first and hung my backpack up on a tree branch. I then told my friend's little brother to pass me his backpack so I could hang it on the branch and make it easier for him to get to where I was. While he was passing me his backpack, his foot slipped off the branch and he didn't have the upper arm strength to carry his own weight yet. He fell the whole way down the tree, landed in the river onto jagged rocks, and was killed instantly. My friend and I were out of that tree faster than I even thought it was possible, and what we saw that day changed us forever. All he wanted to do was hang out with his big brother and do what the big kids were doing. I feel like if I never told him to pass me his backpack, we'd all be in a tree right now drinking a beer, thinking back on all our ventures. But instead, my best childhood friend can no longer be in the same room as me. I've not heard from him or his family in over 10 years, and every single day of my life they pop into my mind and I remember what I did. Everyone tells me it wasn't my fault and it could have happened to anyone, but that doesn't erase the guilt I feel about asking for that stupid backpack. If anyone has a chance to read this, and if you're going to get anything from this story, it's that anything can happen, anywhere at any time, and tell those you love that you love them because you never know when someone will ask for their backpack. Edit. Again, thank you to all who have reached out to me, but I do feel obligated to say this. I'm not beating myself up every single day. I've come a long way since the incident, and it does get easier each and every day. Just because I think of it often doesn't mean it's a negative thing. I think we all reflect on the big bang moments in life when we're soul-searching. Love you all. Edit. Well, you guys have inspired me. I'm going to reach out to the family and see how they're doing, and I cannot thank you all enough. This went way further than I ever thought. I would have been happy if one person read my story and benefited from it, but the amount of messages I've received is overwhelming. Everyone is asking how old I am. I'm 27 years old. Update. 2 weeks later, I've talked to the family. I managed finding him through some friends we went to school with. Apparently, he's been trying to find me for the past few years as well, and he's learned to speak English quite well. We had a really amazing talk, and I'm relieved to know that he doesn't blame me for what happened, and neither does his parents. Again, thank you to everyone who urged me to get in touch with them, and thank you all for the support. Yeah, I just want to take a moment to highlight, I don't think calling this story beautiful is necessarily appropriate, but the message and just the way that it was written and the way that OP feels, it's going to be okay. It's a tragic accident, and it's good to hear that the Reddit community has really helped OP, be uplifted and move on through the situation. Next story. People say euthanizing is illegal for humans in the US, but as a nurse, when I have palliative orders, they're to give narcotics and benzos every 5 minutes as needed. You bet your ass they're given every 5 minutes. I've killed people. They were about to die, and I hope that I took their pain away in the process. But the drugs I've given take that pain away and contribute to their death at the same time. That being said, I've never done this without an order from a physician or without family consent. Throw away anyway, just in case someone decides to pick a bone. Next story. My wife was a nurse in her previous career, and fairly soon after we married, her grandmother's health began to decline. She was hospitalized but returned home, which is where she died surrounded by family. My wife and I had only been there a few hours, and there was a hospice nurse there too, and my wife's grandmother was in clear distress. Her breathing was labored, she was essentially unconscious, and she was basically orange from, at minimum, kidney failure. I remember not really understanding at the time, but my wife would tell the nurse every so often, I think she's still uncomfortable, and a look was exchanged, and the morphine was given. This was all new to me because in my upbringing, people died in hospitals, not at home. I wouldn't have believed it were I not there, and because I'm not very spiritual or emotional person, but there came a moment when this old, oddly colored woman opened her eyes, looked around at everyone, and said, "I love you all," took one more breath, and died right then and there. I remember feeling good about her death, and about the people that were there for it, and I came to understand the unspoken collusion, for lack of a better word, between two people who knew death. When I consider the alternative, the more familiar, protracted, brightly lit, colder and lonelier death in an unfamiliar and impersonal hospital room, I'm glad there are people like my wife and that hospice nurse, and you, who have the wisdom and experience to do that which is not discussed when it's the right thing to do. Next story. I was the driver in a car accident with my 3 best friends. The 3 of them died. I survived somehow. Just writing that makes me nauseous today. And I say today because every day is different. Some days I can talk about it or write about it and I'm okay. And some days I just want to go back in bed and cry and scream. And today apparently is one of those days. The thing is, though, you never really know until something triggers you, and I hate that word, and it leads you into a spiral. Next story. When I was around 6, I had a habit of sleeping on the stairs. One day, my sister, who was currently pregnant, was going down the stairs, ended up tripping over me and fell down, hard. She ended up miscarrying. I guess it's not killing someone in a traditional sense, but in a way, I did kill my unborn niece or nephew. I never really got over it. It was, and still is, horrifying to me. Next story. I was 12 when it happened, and as much as it was a pure accident, my life was better afterward. My mom and I were living with her boyfriend at the time. This man was a drunk and an abuser, and I came home one day from school to find him beating my mom down in the kitchen. I had never even thought about standing up to this guy. He was above 6'3" and very broad, but that day, I came home from school and made me summon all the courage I had to save my mom. As I ran over to them, I grabbed a fork off the table and stabbed him just below his shoulder on the neck. It scared him so much that he had a heart attack and died on the floor. Next story. I was supposed to get up and check on my mom. She'd been fighting cancer for 4 years and had been the majority of my mid-20s. Spent my time on her, left college, etc. She was planning on getting up and driving herself to her doctor's that day, but I usually check on her because she can have bad days. I overslept. It was nearly 11 a.m., and I woke to a phone call from my dad, saying the doctors hadn't seen her. I checked upstairs in her room. The kitchen, nothing. Then I saw the bathroom door open a crack. What was in there was basically half a mummy on the floor and feces everywhere, mixed with vomit. I don't know what happened, but I called 911 without stepping foot in the bathroom. Hello, 911? My mom's dead. The flat pan explanation caught the poor guy off guard completely. I mean, I guess I was in shock, but not really that shocked, you know? He was in a full panic. I followed along and pretended to perform CPR. Her eyes were white. She was covered in vomit, ice cold, and drained like a mummy. Sometime later, I don't have an idea for time perspective, it was all moving very slowly, the paramedics showed up. We're a small town. Everyone knew us. I'm in my underpants, and the lead paramedic is a good friend from high school. The awkward exchange was not something I forget. They pretended to do CPR for about 30 seconds, then get a command to keep working on it in the truck. I messaged him on Facebook later to ask if that was a show, which it was, obviously. He said, basically, we always do that on a deceased at the scene. This was all difficult, but just a gory version of expectation. The next part haunts me. I had to call my dad back. He ran home from work. He ran around the house getting her things. He wanted to make sure we had her medical info and the ER doctors and her medication list. I kept trying to explain we wouldn't need it. I kept trying to keep him in this world. I was too much of a coward. I was speaking in riddles. I couldn't do it. We get to the ER, move to a small room with cheap furniture you only find in rooms where they tell you people die. The doctor came in and addressed him directly in what must have been at most 4 sentences, and then stared at him after. I'm sorry. It was like he had been run over by a car. He just sobbed into his hands for what felt like hours. He got up without a word and left the room. I found him nearly half an hour later pacing in the parking lot. We decided to get crap-faced. My fiancée, now wife, found us somehow 2 hours later 2 blocks away at a bar. To this day, I don't know how. She must have checked every bar in town. A total mess. She sat with us for hours. My dad now has a girlfriend. He thinks I hate him for that, but I don't. He's learned whatever happiness he can find. He pushed through the hardest 4 years of their lives and tried to single-handedly beat cancer with no medical knowledge and no resources. He can be called a lot of crappy things in his life, but for 4 years, he showed me what character is. I just wish I could have been more courageous. It was my place to tell him, not that doctor. Next story. When I was young, I used to get bullied a lot. I was in the 9th grade, and I had this one person, a senior, that would harass me and sometimes hit me constantly. I always tried to just ignore it, but I had to walk outside to get to one of my classes, and he knew about it. Not a lot of people were around us. We were on the sidewalk, walking down a hill towards the AG barn. He pushed me, and I fell down the hill a little, but caught myself. I got angry, angrier than I normally get. I get so angry that for the first time, I pushed him back. Instead of falling to the side, or not falling at all, like I thought he would, he fell right off the sidewalk, onto the road for student parking and buses, and fell in front of a bus. There was a few people watching, and I called the police afterwards. I know he was bullying me, but I have nightmares about what I did still. Because of what people who saw said, and the camera outside the building, luckily I never suffered any consequences, but I almost wish I had. Next story. Not sure if this counts, but when I was a truck driver, in training actually, I had the misfortune to be the tool someone else used to self-unalive themselves. We were driving late at night on US 277 between Piedras Negras and Del Rio. It's kind of the armpit of Texas, flat, straight, boring, right near the border. I was at the wheel. My driver mentor was in his bunk, but awake chatting with me. I saw headlights ahead, a long way off. Didn't think anything of it. After a while, they got close, and it looked like they went to turn left, only there wasn't a road there. Then they straightened out and drove right into us head on. I had just enough time to see that it was a Tacoma and the driver was male. All I could do was let go of the steering wheel and hit the brakes. We were busted up pretty badly, but we cut that pickup in 2. I had a broken wrist, my mentor had a bunch of broken ribs, and a bruised liver. We got out to see the damage. When we walked to the rear, I saw a work boot sitting on the double yellow line, with about 6 inches of leg sticking out. I still get an odd feeling in my stomach when I think about it. Obviously, I didn't plan to kill the guy, and there wasn't much I could do without foreknowledge. Semis aren't exactly nimble, but it still takes a bit to tell yourself you couldn't have done something else. He had a young wife with 2 little girls. Edit. Many people have noted he could have just fallen asleep. This is what we thought at first. It was a couple of weeks before we found out he left a note. Something about being involved with Sinaloa in the wrong way, and taking the best way out for his family. Edit 2. With respect, calling him selfish or an a-hole is judging someone without walking in their shoes. I can't say how scared, alone, and desperate someone would have to be to do what he did, but I know it adds exactly 0 value to the world to condemn him now. Pity him and forgive him. I'm not much for religion, but if there's an afterlife, he surely needs it. And if there isn't, well, be the change you want to see, eh? Edit 3. Sinaloa is one of the major Mexican drug cartels. but they don't control that area at all, which is weird. That's deep Los Zetas country. So I think that the selfishness remarks were more in regards to how he chose to go about doing this, not necessarily the fact that he did it, which in and of itself is an unfortunate circumstance, but driving, speeding head on into a semi, like he could have killed the two guys in the semi as well. So it's like, why are you bringing other people along with you? Innocent people haven't done anything wrong that you don't know, and by proxy, you're now ruining potentially the lives of other families in addition to your own. So that absolutely is selfish. Next story. Undercooked food at a barbecue. Woman got food poisoning. Complications arose because of pre-existing conditions. She got septic and died. She had just recently had a baby, so that was left without a mother. Go me. Double bubble with that F up. So don't cook while drunk, kids, because you might kill someone. Next story. I was working out of town, which is pretty common in my line of work, touring with bands. We had just started a new tour with an artist, but as a crew, a bunch of us had been working for several artists over the last few years. When you work these long hours, sometimes under ridiculous pressure and circumstances, and live in a tour bus, sleeping a few feet away from 11 other grown adults, one of two things happen. You just get in with it, drink away any sadness you have from being so exhausted and missing your family and friends because you haven't seen them in months, or you become incredibly close, like a family. You're together through everything, long, incredibly hard days, or experiencing the joy of something or somewhere new. On this particular tour, it was going to be a smaller group of us than the last tour. No need for a video technician, but we really liked the video technician. We had done a year or two together, and he was a really great kid. Always saw the bright side of everything. You could always count on him to have a smile on his face, no matter how many hours we had been working. Lucky for the tour, more video equipment was added, and so he came out to join us right as we were going into rehearsals for the tour. We went through a week of rehearsals, then took a ferry to Victoria from Vancouver to start the tour. First show done, we all had such a great time. A really easy first day. Load in, the install, went quickly. The show went off without a hitch, and we finished a few hours earlier than we expected. We went back to the hotel to get some food and have a drink. Our rooms were next to each other. It was a nice spring night, and we sat outside on our adjoining balconies. He was a wine expert. He loved red wine. I had an unopened bottle of red in my room, and he had an unopened bottle of white in his room, which he knew I liked. He leaned over his railing to pass me a bottle, which I easily grabbed from him. The balconies were so close together, so I passed him the bottle of red from my room, but he slipped on the wet balcony. After this point, I have no memory of any sounds, but everyone on the tour staying on that side of the hotel heard me screaming. I saw him go over the railing, I saw him hit the side of the hotel, and I saw him land 50 feet below me. I ran to the elevator, yelled at the front desk to call 911 on my way past, but it was too late. It wouldn't have mattered. I got to him and looked into his eyes, and they were lifeless. A large piece of the back of his head was a few feet from us. I held his hand and sobbed that I was sorry until a security guard pulled me off. From that day, we were a tour family, connected by the worst bond imaginable. Next story. I made the incredibly difficult decision to sign a DNR for my 3-year-old son. He suffered from multiple physical and intellectual disabilities. He spent the majority of his life in and out of the pediatric inpatient units. Eventually, I became so sad at the thought of his suffering and continual downhill slide that I made the decision to do no more. I took him home from the hospital, and about 2 weeks later, he went into respiratory distress and died. I held him for 16 hours as he struggled to breathe, and I remember begging the hospice nurse to keep giving him the morphine and the Ativan to end it because my heart couldn't take it anymore. I know I didn't physically kill him, but I still made the mental decision to do so. It hurts each and every day. Edit. As a mom, we instinctively want to keep our child around to love and protect. I have more good days than bad. I believe that any parent who has to make that kind of decision will choose to do the right thing. They have to choose what will make them the least guilty and what they think is best for their child. Parents who choose to take care of their children with disabilities, even those with no cognitive abilities, are doing the right thing for their family. It's hard for those who have never been through it to understand, but I would never wish anyone to have to make that kind of decision. Edit 2. As a lot of you are mentioning, I also asked God to please end it. It was a horrific way to die. His little lungs filled with fluid, and he kept trying so hard to breathe air in through the phlegm for 16 hours. I asked God why this was being so prolonged and why he wouldn't just take him already. My heart was so broken. Next story. I was driving on a small, treacherous mountain road and my brakes went out. My friend talked me through it and I was able to stop my truck by easing into the mountainside at 55 mph. The truck flipped and rolled and landed on the edge of a cliff. My friend's head was crushed during the roll. He tried to breathe, but his neck was broken. He died as I was trying to talk to him. Next story. I killed 2 kids in Afghanistan. They almost killed me. They were maybe 12. Their Taliban uncle had pumped them full of drugs and sent them to attack us to get killed so the village would be against us. F that guy. I still see their faces in my dreams, and it was 7 years ago. Edit. This got far more attention than I thought it would. This is a throwaway, so I'll answer whatever questions you have. To answer some questions so far, no, not the only people I killed. The most disturbing are those 2 kids. The saddest was 2 little girls, maybe 3 and 5, killed by stray artillery round during a firefight. Their family was just farmers trying to raise food to survive. We found a brick of hash and a hash pipe in one of their pockets. Doubtful that they were destined for a life of misery. Most people are happy until their Taliban comes in and F's their crap up. I'm Catholic. My faith gets me through and my priest is amazing. So definitely not speaking from experience here, but I have to imagine that ending the life of a child just has to hit differently than killing a grown-up. That is just, ooh, man. I can't even imagine, but thank you for sharing nonetheless. Next story. Similar to the others here, I was the driver in a car crash, slid on some black ice on the freeway, spun a few times before getting T-boned by an SUV going full speed. Friend in the passenger seat busted up his head in the windshield. My brother behind me fractured his skull, and my best friend in the passenger side back seat died. My friends at the time used humor to get through things. I have a dark sense of humor, but they consistently went too far, and I ended up leaving all my close friends. For years after, I had to go to court because of other cars that were affected by the crash, and my friend's mom was trying to sue me for more money than the $100K my insurance already paid out. I used to scream out in my sleep. I dropped out of college shortly after and attempted self-unaliving. Much better now, but 5 years later, and I still get anxiety when it snows. Next story. When I was 14, my friends and I wanted to go to the beach, so I suggested the one near my house. It was notorious for bad rips, but I just figured that we would spot them and stay away. It was about 6 p.m. when we got there, and the lifeguards had gone home. We were in knee-deep water when we felt the pull of a rip. Me and the other friend made it out, but the 2 that were less than a meter further out than me couldn't. For the first 5 minutes, we thought that they would be fine and that they would catch a wave in. After that, we knew there was a problem. We started looking for someone and finally found an off-duty lifeguard 10 minutes after they were swept out. The lifeguard got aboard and was able to save one of my friends. He couldn't find the other. Her body was found later that night. If I hadn't suggested that beach, if I had been quicker to find a lifeguard, if I had spotted the rip, my best friend would still be alive. Next story. I'll post this because I don't usually talk about it in my life, but here I don't feel alone. I was 9 years old and my brother, 11 years old, when we were pretty close. But after moving to a new state, he wanted to have his own friends. Feeling left out, I decided I wanted to be part of this friendship he had just developed. Quick backstory. My brother and I were seen as outcasts in New Jersey, moving from a southern state, and it wasn't easy adjusting. He had just made a best friend, Ricky, who was top of the class, star Pee Wee quarterback, and all-around loved kid. They decided to go for a bike ride down to the local reservoir where most kids would hang out. I followed them after being specifically told by my brother to stay behind. They ended up leaving their bikes behind and hiking around a dangerous overpass by the waterfall and ended up finding me trailing them not too far behind. As upset as my brother was, he knew we were too far in the journey to turn back and reluctantly accepted the fact that he couldn't enjoy his bonding experience without me being a nuisance. Less than a few minutes later, after me constantly slipping on the rocks that were extremely close to tragedy, we decided to wash the mud off our shoes. Ricky decided it was too dangerous for me to wash my shoes and took the task himself to protect me. In less than the blink of an eye, Ricky was gone, vanished into thin air. The police recovered his body days later, and my brother was seen as a murderer and, quote, that weird kid who killed our beloved son by the whole town. The pain that doesn't go away rots in my mouth, knowing he'll never be happy because I took the only hope we had away from him. Being poor and helpless kids, I took my brother's light at the end of the tunnel and dimmed it for good. My brother and I are still close, but he and I both know that day changed our lives forever. If only I'd listened to my big brother, life as we know it wouldn't be the same. Thank you, stranger, for reading this, as I know we all feel pain. It's nauseating knowing I took a life worth more than my own. Next story. I worked armed security for a campus police department. Most of the department are police with a few of my type. In my state, I'm considered a non-sworn law enforcement, and to someone not in the same industry, have most of the same authority as a police officer. There are differences, but for this, it is pedantic. I had a guy walk into the area where I was eating my dinner with a cut down the side of his face. So naturally, I shift into help mode, and I'm all about getting this guy first aid. He told me someone had just stolen his car and cut his face. So I called for a police officer to handle the felony report and medics for this guy's face. Then comes that awkward moment of waiting while this guy bleeds all over himself and the two of us just staring at each other. And I hate awkward moments. My patrol car had a trauma kit for active shooter. We're only supposed to use it on fellow officers, but F that. This guy's bleeding all down his shirt. So I offered him that kit with the caveat that I'm not an EMT, and he accepted. So I hopped up and went to the door that my car was parked at. Right when I got to the door, this guy was lagging behind me, and I don't like people behind me, so I stopped and tried to get him to sit down and wait for me to get the kit. That's when he said, "Officer, I have a problem." I don't remember hearing anything after that, so I guess my auditory memory shut off. Right after he said that, he conjured up a mini sledgehammer. I have absolutely no idea where it came from, but it was just there in his hand, and he was raising it up high. I dropped what felt like a slow, breathy, "Oh, F me," and I started backing up and drawing my pistol. The situation took a pretty big spiral downward after that, because by backing up, I tripped over some furniture and fell down between an ottoman and a fireplace grate with my weapon side down to the ground. He was charging through with that hammer, so I couldn't stand up or I'd be in range, so I just dove away, into a corner. He plowed through the furniture and I was still on the ground. Right then, I cracked. Nowhere to go, no distance to create. The guy I was going to help was going to kill me. All I wanted to do was curl into a ball, cry, and beg for my life. Once that flash of pathetic wimpiness hit, I became pissed, absolutely livid. I was mad at myself for giving up, mad at this a-hole who thought he could kill me. I've never, ever felt that kind of rage before. I got into a kneeling position and then bum rushed him. I grabbed the wrist with the hammer and shook the crap out of it, and he dropped the hammer. Then, in my rage, all I wanted to do was rip his scraggy beard off his effing face. My memory blanks out right about there and kicks back in with me leaning way back against a high desk and this guy over the top of me. To shorten it up, after that, he pawed at my holster, tried to grab my neck with both hands, eventually pulled a picture-perfect takedown and got full mount. Eventually, I was on my feet, grappling out in the open with no furniture or anything blocking me, and I knew I was too gassed to keep going. There was no hammer anymore, but I couldn't keep fighting the grapple fest that we were doing. I shoved him hard, drew my gun, pulled the trigger, click, misfire. Hands down, the biggest what the F moment I've ever had. I managed to shove him again, whacked the side, then fired 2 rounds. My auditory memory kicked back in, and he said, "All right, I'm done." He kind of fell to the floor and was flopping around trying to get back up. I got my radio up and running since the fight knocked it off me and called for backup. He had a hand down at his waistline, and I could see blood up on his shoulder. I just kept my gun on him and waited for backup, just trying to breathe and not puke up the blood I was just eating. My backup arrived, told me to go outside, where I immediately puked up spaghetti and lemon pepper chicken. The guy died before the medics could stabilize him in the room. From the time I called for police and medics to the time I called in shots fired, it was 3 minutes. Take away the awkward staring, me going for a first aid kit, and the radio pickup, the whole fight was probably just under 2 minutes. Next story. When I was 4, I had a habit of pushing people around. One day, my frail 76-year-old grandma was walking in the lawn, and I kind of just pushed her. I didn't know the gravity of my actions, but I remember her going down and just staying there. I didn't say anything. I was also frozen, not knowing what to do next. Then I remember the hospital visits. My aunt from the States coming home, asking me what happened, why I did that, and I just cried. I honestly didn't know why. 2 weeks later, Grandma died. And 12 years later, my family still occasionally jokes around that Grandma will haunt me for killing her. I just laugh, but inside it hurts because I blame myself for her death. Next story. I had a close friend in my physics program around 5 years ago. During summer break, we would chat every day or so about our lives, what we were doing, and what our plans were coming back to school. I was really into cycling at the time, and I was encouraging her to get a mountain bike or something similar so we could go riding when she got back into town. I encouraged her enough that she told me the next day she was going to go riding. That was the last thing I ever said to her. That next day, while she was riding with her father, her tire hit her father's and she lost control and swerved into the road just as a large truck was passing. They had to have a closed casket funeral. I know people are going to tell me that it isn't my fault, but I'm always haunted by the belief that if I hadn't encouraged her to go riding, she never would have, and she would still be here today. Her parents wouldn't have lost their only daughter. Next story. 1995, was living with my druggy mother and sister who was 4 years older than me. My mom worked at a bar and as a 7-year-old kid lived half my time in that bar. We did have a house that was more of a shed on a lot that was converted into a house. Well, my mom got close with one of the patrons who also drank a lot and did drugs. Well, one day she broke up with him, I guess, and he kept coming over threatening her. A few days later, she gets a call from him. Not sure what was said, but she tries to hurry us into the back room where we kept our clothes. She attempts to hide us under the clothes, but I start freaking out and try to leave the house. As I get to the front door, a truck pulls in. I stop and hear him get out, screaming for my mother. He tries to get in the door at first and fails. I'm about 3 feet to the side of the front door. He shoots at the door. I freak and jump on top of the couch that's right next to the door while also grabbing my t-ball bat. He kicks and kicks at the door and it finally opens. He walks in and I pout him right in the forehead. He instantly goes out. I scream and my mom finally comes out with my sister and we both leave and then call the police at the bar. That same night, I went to go live with my father permanently as my mother had arrest warrants. I didn't know until I was about 16 that he had ended up dying in the hospital between my concussion and alcohol poisoning. I don't feel bad about it though. Not to make light of like anybody passing away, but a big tough guy like that to be unalived by a t-ball bat, not a baseball bat, a t-ball bat. That seems like some poetic justice to me. Next story. I was 15. My best friend and I promised one another we'd call the other and let them talk us down if we were feeling wanting to self-unalive. He called me around dinner one night that I planned to stay to watch the re-airing of a Colbert Report. Mixed the call at dinner time, but was fighting with my mom, so didn't call back. Fell asleep before the report, and my friend called again twice just after midnight from the roof of our high school. I slept through it, and his texts, so he jumped. It was 10 years this February 8th. I'm so sorry, Zach. Next story. Throwaway, because I don't want anyone I know thinking about it. When I was 5 years old, my family was living on a small street of an army base. My best friend lived 2 houses down, and we would forever pick on our sisters. Mine was 4, and his was 3. One day, we thought it would be fun to climb onto the carport and yell for them to try and find us. And when they did, we would splash them with water from up high. Mine came and went as planned. His sister, however, ran into the street and was crushed by a moving truck driving by. He just screamed. I jumped off, trying to get her to wake up. Everyone in the family came outside to see what was going on, only to see me trying to shake awake this bloody mess of a little girl. My family drugged me away and the ambulance showed up to take away the body. My friend moved away within weeks, and I didn't play outside until we moved from that house less than a year later. Years after, I would drive by there just to cry. I still think about it sporadically, but I've never sought professional help for it. I was responsible for others during my time in the military, but none have ever had the same impact. Next story. In 76, I was 6 years old. My grandpa was my best friend and my hero. He always wore striped bib overalls, so I had to have matching ones. I'd sit on his lap and we'd eat Cheetos and watch Zorro. We'd also play a silly game, pulling hair out of each other's arm. We were wrestling around one day, and I hit him in the nose with my head, and it started to bleed. So badly that he ended up in the hospital. He died 2 days later. I was always told that I remembered it wrong, and I had nothing to do with it. Last year, I was at my uncle's, another man who I greatly admired. I knew he would tell me the truth, so I asked him. He pretty much said I remembered it correctly. Grandpa was taking blood thinners, and the hospital never really got the bleeding stopped, and he basically choked to death. Before anyone says my uncle was an a-hole for telling me this, I'm grateful to finally know the truth. Next story. 14 years old. Spent the night at my best friend's house after our hometown 4th of July celebration. Woke up in the morning to find that her mother had left us to babysit her 8-month-old sister while she, the mom, ran errands. We are painting our nails on the floor of the kitchen while the infant cruises around in her walker and hear a crash. We forgot to put the gate up and the baby fell down the stairs in her walker. 7 effing stairs. She hit her head on the railing and died in the hospital after 3 days in the ICU. About 4 years of PTSD for me, but no one really knew I was there. My best friend was branded a baby killer. High school is tough. Next story. I posted this before. When I was a medical student on my surgery rotation, I was in the OR with only the attending surgeon. The residents on service were otherwise busy, so the attending surgeon, somewhat impatiently, decides, fine, I'll do it with just the med student. It's a relatively straightforward case, placing a gastric tube for a patient who couldn't eat. The institution I now work at frequently does these under laparoscopic visualization, which is seen as overly cautious by some, not me. The attending puts a scope down the patient's esophagus, and I have a big needle to push towards the scope. His scope had a bright light, which he shines towards the skin when he's entered the stomach, and I press on the skin and see it dent in on the screen, showing we're in the right place. I thought I took the exact same position and angle and introduced the needle, except it didn't show up on the screen. So I pulled back, pressed again, and tried again and didn't see it. The attending grows frustrated and tells me to push the needle in deeper then. I had a twinge of concern, but eventually hubbed the needle, which was several inches long. Never see it on the screen. Eventually, the resident shows up and tries as well. He introduces the needle, but never can visualize it. Eventually, he switched places with the attending, and after another try, he got the needle into the stomach and we finished placing the tube. I come back after my day off to find out that the patient died from internal bleeding. One of the multiple needle pokes, or possibly a cumulative effect, had injured arteries in the abdomen, leading to them bleeding out overnight. Now I know not to ignore that twinge, and I know that even low-risk procedures have a risk of catastrophe, and always take care to mention that when consenting patients for surgery. Low risk, not no risk. I harbored guilt over it throughout medical school and still had hesitation the first time I did that procedure as a resident. Next story. This story is a bit of a weird one. So I was living with a few friends in a house share. One evening it was my turn to put the bins out, but it was raining hard outside and I was comfortable. So I ran the bags out to the back alley and left them next to the trash can, which was already full. As I passed out of our back gate, however, one of the bags got caught on the latch and ripped a bit, spilling a bit of garbage out into the back lane. Because it was raining, I decided I'd clean it the next morning and ran back indoors. I end up sleeping in the next day, and I get up around midday to sort the garbage out. As I head out into the lane, I see that there's garbage everywhere. I assume that the seagulls must have got it, and I start to clean up. I head back inside, and my friend sees me and tells me that the lady next door has had an accident. Apparently, early in the morning, she had heard the seagulls in the lane squawking and ripping the trash bag apart. She had started to clean up the mess, but had slipped and hit her head. She was in her 80s, and after getting back inside, she felt ill and had a bad turn. The ambulance had to come get her, and later that day, she had died. Brain aneurysm. Now I don't know how those work, but I'm guessing that the slip and bang to the head was the reason for this happening. I felt very guilty for not having cleaned the mess up when it had happened, and now I have this nagging feeling every time I think something could create a hazard for someone else. Sorry, old lady. I didn't mean for you to get killed. Next story. Okay, I'll bite. My dad was a drug addict. He was also disabled because doing drugs leads to stupid mistakes and wrecks your health. After leaving for most of my life, he came back needing me and my family to take care of him. I resented him a lot for that and still do. He seemed clean for a long time until I started seeing foils around the house. He got more and more obvious about it and finally stopped trying to hide it to anyone but me. Well, my senior year, I was really busy with work and preparing for college. By busy, I mean the most time I spent at home was to sleep. I had a lot of money saved up, and my entire family knew it and was trying to get their hands on it. One day, he asked for some grocery money. I told him I'd buy whatever he wanted since I was heading to the store now. He ignored me and kept asking for money, so I told him I was busy at work and stopped replying. It was pretty obvious what that money was going to be used for at this point. He kept asking for days, and I kept refusing, saying I could take care of whatever he needed if he just told me what it was. Well, I came home for lunch one day, and my mom runs to this house to bring him his lunch. I'm leaving to go back to school when she runs out of the house yelling for help. My stepdad and I run in after I dial 911 and have him recite the address. I saw him and knew he was dead right away, but my mom insisted he was alive and just passed out. Well, after that awful experience, I couldn't help but think what the money he wanted was for. That withdrawals kill people. That it was my fault. I know logically it wasn't my fault, and if it wasn't, then he would have died sooner or later, but it creeps into my head when I'm having a hard time. No matter how much anyone tells me it's not my fault, it still feels like it is. For clarification, my mom and dad were divorced and he moved in across the street for help. Edit. For clarification, I will add he's had a serious problem with benzo as well as a host of other drugs. Alcohol and benzo withdrawal can kill you, especially if you have other conditions, which my father had. Please stop telling me he did not die from that because it's not possible. Next story. I was seeing a guy for over a year. One of the most amazing people. Hilarious, works with kids, takes care of family. I loved him. He was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. He had about 2 years to live. Lots of headaches, seizures. He was really ashamed and fearful of being a burden. There was a surgery offered to him. It had a decent chance to give him an extra 5 to 7 years. He wasn't interested, and that broke my heart. We talked, and I convinced him. He agreed to have it and went in about a month later. He had a massive stroke during the surgery and died. He had a DNR that I didn't know about. They had to let him go. His mom vomited when she found out. I'll never be able to face his family. It's taken me years to talk about it, but I think about him every day. I'll never forgive myself for being that selfish. Next story. I was 6 years old, and during the summer, my dad worked 16 to 18-hour days, so he would leave me with a babysitter. My babysitter was recently divorced, and unknown to my dad, she had a heroin addiction. She would often ask me to get her medicine. I wasn't really sure what it was, just that it came in a small bag hidden in the pantry behind some soup cans, and that she took it in the morning and would sleep until afternoon. One day, I give the heroin to her, and she went into her room. I watched TV for a few hours until I was hungry and wanted her to make me something to eat. I went into her room and found her laying on her back, not moving. I called 911, and my dad and I weren't sure what had happened, but I knew that it had to be something to do with what I had been getting her from behind the tomato soup. 12 years later, and every day I remember what she looked like laying there, with a needle in her arm, looking up at the ceiling. It wasn't until years later, when I had learned about heroin in school, that I had realized what it was and how I had given her that fatal dose. Next story. I know I'm late to this, so there's no chance it gets seen, but I need to get this out there. I'm 22 now. This happened when I was 19, and I still think about it almost every day. From the time I was really young, 4 or 5 probably, my dad had kidney problems. He was on dialysis for a while, got a transplant that lasted for a good few years, and then back to dialysis. The last stint on dialysis lasted 10 years. He finally decided he was in too much agony to continue treatment. He came home with the plans to live his last few days in the comfort of his home, surrounded with loved ones. Fast forward 2 weeks, which is a long time to survive without dialysis for those who aren't aware. Dad's health is going downhill fast. All the symptoms of the end stages of uremic poisoning. We knew the inevitable was going to happen, and probably very soon. He was gasping for air with every breath. To this day, it's the hardest thing I've ever witnessed. Hospice had provided comfort drugs for the end stages, namely concentrated liquid morphine. I couldn't stand to see the strongest man I'd ever known struggle anymore, so I loaded 2 syringes with morphine and put them under his tongue. I know it was the poison in his body. I know it was the sickness. I know he was suffering, and I made the right decision. But I also have to live with the fact that I know the dose of morphine I administered was what ended it all for him. It's not easy knowing that you technically ended your father's life. Next story. I work at a skilled nursing facility. I was transporting a patient with dementia in a wheelchair. I braked suddenly because I forgot something in his room, and he lost his balance and fell forward onto the floor. He ended up breaking his nose. A week goes by and he dies of respiratory failure. I feel like the broken nose may have been a factor. Next story. I posted this before, so I'll just copy and paste it here. It's not something I ever want to type more than once. Here's the original. Today is always hard for me. I've gone to therapy, being treated for PTSD for the past 9 or so years. 1 failed self-unaliving attempt, but I'm doing better. My coworkers know I was in the Army, did 2 tours, saw and did some pretty awful crap, and have my down days here and there. Today was one, and when asked how I was, I couldn't tell them what today really was, so I just said, it's just one of those days. I can't traumatize them with this, but I have to get it out there. If you want a happy rest of your week, I'd stop right about here. I was in the Army for 6 years and served in 2 tours, one in Iraq, one in Afghanistan. Joined in 2002, partly because of 9/11, partly because it was my chance to get out of middle of nowhere USA and go see middle of nowhere anywhere else. My second tour was Afghanistan, stationed near cabal. Most days was the same old routine. Drive in the front, look for IEDs, and shoot back whenever someone shoots at you. Just the calm, low-key desk job I was looking for. Sometimes you get where you're going in one piece, without getting shot at or blown up. September 20th, 2006. Just another day. Get to go home in about a month, assuming I don't die. Everyone gears up and we all head out. Apparently, there's some middle-of-nowhere Afghanistan town about 25 miles away that some high-ranking Al-Qaeda guys are hiding out. Naturally, we want to go there and off the bastards before they try to off us. This was one of the days where no one shot at us and blew us up. I hated those days. Felt like you were just sitting on the edge of your seat waiting for action to start already. We get to this town, if you could call it that, and it was maybe 200 to 300 people, mostly shepherds and their families. We go door to door, looking for the Al-Qaeda guys. We get 2/3 of the way through, nothing turns up. By now, I'm thinking it was a bad lead. We're out here looking for shadows, and generally pissing these shepherds off. Knock on another door, no answer. Knock again, no answer. But I hear movement. This might be our guy. Call some backup over, break down the door, and lo and behold, there's a guy with an AK pointed right at us. I shot first and killed him. Never pleasant, but good to know you beat him to it. These guys are clever though. There were 3 more in the house right across from this one, and we had our backs turned to it. They come out shooting, get one of our guys in the arm and another in the chest. Thank God for body armor. I grab the guy shot in the arm, another grabs the guy in the chest. And we back into the cleared house for cover, laying down a few shots every few seconds to keep them at bay. And here's where I screwed the pooch. I looked around the door, see movement, and shoot. Pop, 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 just like that. But I didn't get one of the attackers. I shot a boy who couldn't have been more than 14. I shot him 3 times, and watched him fall like a bag of rocks. Killing a man who has a gun pointed at you is one thing, but a child? I can't describe it. It's instant guilt and anger. Why don't you pause to look for half a second? Why 3 shots? Why not 2 or 1? Why was he here? Why? I don't remember much from the rest of it. Apparently, I just sat there, staring at him the whole fight. Some guys assumed I was dead, since I was just sort of slumped over and stopped moving. We killed 2, wounded 1, and took him in. Eventually turned him over to Afghani security forces. Dressed our guy's arm, pulled our other guy out on a stretcher because we didn't want him moving after a shot to the chest. I shuffled my way through it all, got through the rest on my month doing desk duty and counseling. Got cleared of what I'd done, since it was the heat of battle. Come home, saw my family, got treatment. Lived my life, lived the American dream, and every day I think about that boy. He never got to have his life. I took it from him. Friends, family he had, would have, herding sheep, and another 60 to 70 years. For the first few years, this is how I thought. I took that from him, but I still had it for me. How is that fair? So, after a night of heavy drinking, alone, I decided that the right thing to do would be to unalive myself so I wouldn't have the opportunities I took from him. I had another shot for me. Toasted another for him, got in my car, turned it on, and waited to suffocate. I passed out from the fumes and the drinks, but my wife came home early, found me unconscious, and called 911. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later, and by any account, I should have died. While I was recovering, I saw my situation in 2 ways. Either A, God was flipping me the bird, wanting to make me suffer in my guilt every day, or B, I was meant to go on living, and every day I'd have to live for that boy. See something funny? Bet he would have smiled. See someone in need? Bet he would have wanted to help. I can't just be the best person I can be. I have to be twice that because I'm living for 2 people. In the past 6 years, I think I've become a better person. I don't try to forget what I did. I can't. I won't. And because of that, I still have my down and out days. But September 20th is always the worst. I just try to get through it without breaking down, get home and have 2 drinks, one for me and a toast for him. I'm not 100%, and I doubt I ever will be again, but I get a little closer every day. Next story. I'm a Vietnam veteran. The first person I finished was in November 1967. It was my first tour and I was on my first patrol. We got into a firefight with a group of Charlies, Viet Cong. During the firefight, I fired off a bunch of shots and I may have done away with somebody, but the first person I know I finished came as the fight was wrapping up. I came from out of cover as several other guys screamed they were falling back. I saw one short little guy running away, aimed my rifle at him, and fired a round into his back. He dropped instantly. I remembered how shocked and quick and largely uneventful it was. It wasn't even remotely dramatic. In fact, it was almost more humorous than anything. I remember one guy named Bob, a crazy Pollock's son of a female dog, shouted, "Bullseye, Hilljack," his nickname for me. I later found his body, and I remember he looked older, like he was around 30. I had only just turned 18. He was a little bit fat, and I remember he had really good teeth. Most Vietnamese didn't. Felt a little bit uncomfortable as I had just taken a man's life, but I felt good overall, knowing one less enemy was in the jungle. I served several more tours in Vietnam, and since I was only 5'7", I was a tunnel rat. So, as you fellas can imagine, I knocked off more than a few men. But that first time will always be the most personal and memorable. Next story. On 11/14/2012, my then boyfriend asked me what I wanted to do for the day. I told him that I wanted to go driving around and look at houses. We ended up taking a back road, and the last minute he crashed into a tree. He passed away instantly, according to paramedics. If it weren't for me suggesting looking at houses that day, he'd still be alive. It's not killing someone in the traditional sense, but it's my choices that caused this. Next story. I've told this story before and am late to the show, but here's my story again with an update. When I was 18, I went out to a party with my brother-in-law. We were both drinking and decided to go back home for the night. While he was older, he was a firefighter, meaning if he got a DUI, his career would be over and my sister and nephew would be left without support. So I took it upon myself to drive us home. Stupid reasoning, I know. Long story short, we crossed a highway and were T-boned by an F-250 going over 65 mph. My brother-in-law died on impact, and I woke up in the ER a few hours later and was told the news that he was gone. I swear I could feel the weight of the world crashing down on my chest. I broke down and cried for hours, thought about unaliving myself every day in ICU. It's been 9 years, and every time I think of it, I get that same feeling. Some days are better than others. Some days I can almost forget what happened, but it's always on the back of my mind. My life has kind of crumbled since then. I was sent to prison for what I did, got out and entered college only to drop out several times from different schools. I spent the whole time fighting off various addictions and have been unsuccessful at maintaining any close relationships. But I don't think about unaliving myself anymore. I simply couldn't. I took his life. It'd be an insult to his memory to take my own life, too. I want so badly to live a better life in honor of his memory, and I try. But for now, I wake up every day. That's as much as I can promise right now, but it's what I can do. 2017 update. My life is finally catching up to where it should be for my age. I'm happily remarried, have 2 amazing stepsons, my daughter, and my wife and I recently had a boy. I just bought a house and have become a partner with my father in the family business. I've been alcohol-free for the last 6 months. I feel like my life is finally getting to the point where my brother-in-law could be proud of me. His memory is finally being honored by the way I'm living, and it's the closest I've ever come to knowing peace. Just wanted to highlight that last sentence. His memory is finally being honored by the way that I am living. That is such an honorable and noble thing to do, and really a mature way to look at it. Sounds like you've grown and are starting to move on. So that's great, man. Proud of you. Next story. Everyone tells me that I need to get over it, to move on. It's not my fault. Lots of people tell me lots of things about this. I'm kind of drunk, and that helps me tell this story. To this day, I firmly believe that my inaction killed a 2-year-old little girl. 8 years ago, I was working at a local chapter of a national disaster response agency. Before said agency went through all of its changes, decision-making was kept at the local level. This led the local chapter I was working at to F up a lot. Before I started as an AmeriCorps member, the previous executive director had been fired for inaction. The AmeriCorps member before me was working a second job for the local emergency management agency and had stolen federal grant money and ended up in federal prison for a while. Anyway, they hired a new executive director, new program director, and after a little bit, they got an AmeriCorps member, me. Being the only young person on the team, I started slowly updating the computer system and integrating us into the natural disaster database. One of my functions was to take all of the old disaster files, mainly house fires, and enter them into the database. We were required to enter all of the client data, case notes, and action plan for each fire. Even though we're a small chapter, I had about 80 cases to enter. I started entering the 3rd week of August, and at the same time I was working on entering the backlog of cases, my chapter responded to 7 house fires in 5 weeks. What most people don't tell you is that most fires happen in the middle of the night. Most, but not all. One Saturday morning, about 10 a.m., I was called out to respond to a house fire in a small town out in the country. When I got there, the fire department was still on the scene. I do the whole routine: get information, take them to a hostel, issue client assistance card, and move forward. I come back and enter the information, and I get this sense of deja vu. However, seeing that it was a beautiful day and I had been working on the case for 4 hours, I blew the feeling off. That Sunday, I went off call for 3 weeks. I knew that we had a fire during those 3 weeks, but because of working on the backlog, I didn't immediately enter the new file. So it's the first week of October. I'm entering the newest case file, and it hits me. The main adult names are different, but the kids' names are the same. The date of birth and last four of the social match, and that's when I start to piece it together. In 2 years, this extended family has had 5 fires in 4 different jurisdictions. Being rural, we have one professional fire service in our biggest town, and everyone else around us being volunteers. This often leads to my chicken is bigger syndrome, and information sharing doesn't happen. So I take this information to my boss. I line out the following case. Without going too much into the details, Mom and Dad are not together in this picture. Fire 1, at Mom's house, 2 years ago, Jurisdiction 1. Fire 2, at Dad's apartment 18 months ago, Jurisdiction 2. Fire 3, fire at Grandma and Grandpa's 6 months ago, Jurisdiction 3. Fire 4, fire at Grandma and Grandpa's / Dad and Girlfriend's apartment 3 weeks ago, Jurisdiction 3. Fire 5, fire at Grandma and Grandpa's, Mom and Mom's brother, etc. 2 weeks ago, Jurisdiction 4. I say the main thing in common with all these fires is that these kids are at home at the time of the fire and they hadn't been left unattended. This has to be a juvenile fire setter. In my mind, that was the only explanation, and I told my boss we had to call the office of the state fire marshal and report this. After taking all this in, she looked at me and said, "That's not our job." At this point, I knew I had to do something. I knew that I was the only person that had put it together. I had the moral imperative to blow the whistle and stand my ground. I had the duty to go out of ranks and report what I had found out. And I was too scared to pick up the phone. I was too scared of getting in trouble to do the decent and right thing. The first week of November at 8 a.m. in the morning, the disaster phone rang. It was county dispatch alerting me to a fire on the east side of town. When I pulled up, I knew something was wrong. All the firefighters were kind of milling around looking lost. The fire chief was on site. The ambulance was just pulling away. She burned to death. Not smoke inhalation. The fire started in the mattress she was sleeping on and she burned to death. Actually, no, that's not 100% true. She arrived at the hospital and was alive for 2 hours with 3rd and 4th degree burns on 90% of her body. I didn't do my job. I didn't stand up and do the right thing. A little girl died.